52 years after the catastrophic destruction of the Second Temple, Judea existed entirely under the shadow of the Roman Empire. The Jewish population responded by organizing the Great Revolt of Bar Kokhba, a massive, coordinated military campaign specifically designed to restore sovereign independence to the region. This rebellion was fully backed by the spiritual and intellectual titan of the era, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students were active combatants and high-ranking leaders in the armed conflict against Rome. Military casualties often reframed in later texts as victims of a plague. The rebellion's collapse resulted in a total vacuum, eradicating the next generation of judicial leadership. The military aftermath was devastating, punctuated by the brutal fall of the rebel capital, Batar. In the wake of the battle, Rome recognized that physical military victories were insufficient as long as the Jewish constitutional framework survived. Emperor Hadrian pivoted his strategy. He moved from military suppression to the targeted legislative extinction of the Jewish judicial system. The physical war of swords was lost. Now, the struggle to preserve a 1,500-year continuous constitutional chain had begun. Hadrian issued a specific lethal decree, the absolute criminalization of samika, the formal process of rabbinic ordination. Execution was the penalty for the judge who performed the ordination and the student receiving it, followed by the total military annihilation of the city where the ceremony occurred. To prevent the legal chain from breaking, an elder scholar named Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava made a calculated decision to defy the empire. He gathered 5 surviving students and took them deep into a desolate wasteland, positioned exactly halfway between 2 distant towns. This ensured no civilian population could be targeted or punished for his actions. In the remote wilderness, he ordained the students. The objective chain of judicial authority was secured. Realizing Roman soldiers were closing in, Rabbi Yehuda commanded his newly ordained students to flee. He remained behind to block the road, absorbing the pursuit of the Roman soldiers. His sacrifice kept the institutional authority alive, but the trauma of this persecution wounded the mechanism by which that authority would be transmitted. The surviving scholars were now officially masters of the law, yet they lived as fugitives, in a state of perpetual flight. This reality birthed a critical Talmudic diagnostic principle, shelo shimshu kol tzarchan, meaning they did not fully serve their masters. Serving the master meant decades of quiet, practical observation and mimetic apprenticeship, witnessing exactly how an elder judge ruled on nuanced cases. These surviving students possessed flawless photographic memorization of the core legal texts. They also perfectly memorized the Simtane hermeneutical principles, the logic system used to derive new laws from those core texts. This diagram shows the chain of transmission flowing uniformly downward until it slams into a blockade. Because they were fleeing wars, students had the rules in their heads, but lacked the practical experience of seeing masters apply that logic. The loss of this mimetic apprenticeship is the structural root cause that fractured unanimous consensus and birthed the culture of Talmudic dispute. Decades later, during an era of relative peace, grand study halls emerged, filled with dynamic and rigorous scholarly debate. We can map the constitutional boundary of these debates on this diagram. At the center sits the undisputed Sinai tradition. The explosion of disputes in this era never questioned this core. The foundational transmission of the law remained completely intact and perfectly agreed upon by all opposing scholars. The fracture occurred exclusively at the edges. The disputes arose when scholars confronted new, evolving legal questions that had never been addressed before. To govern these new frontiers, scholars took the 13 hermeneutical principles and mapped them on completely unfamiliar scenarios. This culture of debate emerged as scholars mapped the ancient logic of the 13 principles onto an expanding legal frontier. Deprived of their masters' direct practical rulings, these brilliant minds had no choice but to rely on their own independent, rigorous logic. When highly intelligent scholars independently apply objective logic to identical new problems, they arrive at differing yet rational conclusions. Rigorous pluralism replaced the older era of singular consensus, defining the internal logic of the legal system. Rome's attempt to extinguish the law through force shifted the tradition's source of power. The legal chain moved beyond reliance on mimetic observation. becoming a system sustained by the application of independent logic.